There are a lot of ways to design a monster. Some are big, loud, and imposing, while others are silent, mysterious, and elusive. Some monsters are intelligent, while others are little more than mindless beasts. A monster can be many things, but at the very least, we have the comfort of knowing that they don't actually exist. Monsters are nothing more than figments of the human imagination. They reside within our minds. But sometimes, that's where they become the most dangerous. The idea of an evil entity haunting dreams is nothing new. There are plenty of legends and folklore surrounding the concept of nightmares, and even modern stories have used the idea of bad dreams being more than just dreams quite often. The idea of the dream killer, who can inflict real damage and even death through your unconscious mind, is a fairly well-known trope. And if you're familiar with League's history at this point, you'll know that many of the game's earlier champions were nothing but tropes. Nocturne was released on March 5th, 2011. The premise behind his character was a simple one, that he was a monster who stalked and killed people in their dreams. In the current lore, Nocturne is officially confirmed to be a demon, though that wasn't always the case. Before the Great Retcon, demons didn't even exist in Runeterra as far as we knew. Nocturne's origins were a complete mystery and the topic of heavy speculation in the community for years. In his original incarnation, Nocturne was discovered after a peculiar string of nightmares began afflicting people all over Runeterra. Those affected would frequently wake up screaming in the dead of night, or not at all. The situation got so bad that even the ludicrously overpowered summoners were affected, but eventually they managed to isolate one sleeping victim and observed a dark figure emerging just as the man let out a final terrified scream. Nocturne lashed out at first, but was quickly contained and studied. The summoners initially thought to execute the monster, but some argued that doing so might simply release him from his physical form back into the realm of dreams, where the slaughter may continue. Thus, the summoners agreed to do as they had with so many other monsters and force Nocturne to fight in the League of Legends on their behalf. As with many older horror-themed champions, a lot was left intentionally vague about Nocturne, though that's not necessarily a bad thing unto itself. Here, we have what is effectively the Freddy Krueger of League, albeit with an even greater air of mystery about him. There was also a bit of irony present in how Nocturne subjected people to unspeakable torments in their sleep, only to end up in his own personal nightmare of serving humans that could now freely probe his mind. In spite of that, however, even the summoners could never truly glean Nocturne's real nature. Now, as I said before, there were a decent few fan theories back in the day regarding Nocturne's origins. However, perhaps the most prominent one was the theory that Nocturne was actually Zed from the future. Truthfully, I never really bought into this myself, as the strands of evidence for it were thin at best. Still, the theory was so popular that I feel it warrants mentioning, especially because, well, we'll get to that later. There are three main points of comparison that fans would draw to connect this theory. 1. Zed is a practitioner of shadow magic, and Nocturne is a living shadow whose powers seem heavily rooted in darkness. 2. Both characters fight primarily with blades on their arms. And 3. Shockblade Zed's splash art lines up rather nicely with Nocturne's reworked splash art. Yeah, the points of comparison become more and more of a stretch the more you go, but the first one at least does make for some interesting discussion. Apparently, Riot thought so too, because that possible connection between Nocturne and shadow magic was basically confirmed in Nocturne's new lore. Now, granted, Nocturne's rebooted bio is still somewhat vague about his origins, but we're basically given three main possibilities. Nocturne was a single shadow mage corrupted and transformed by his own power. He's the result of various shadow mages' power coalescing into a singular being, or he was an Azakana residing in the spirit realm that absorbed their rampant shadow magic to become a full-fledged demon. Personally, I like the last theory the most, but it ultimately doesn't matter. Nocturne was created by the misuse of this one arcane art, leading to the whole practice becoming forbidden for years. Now, Nocturne stalks the dreams of mortals throughout Runeterra, because shadow magic allows you to traverse the border of the physical and spirit realms. For those unaffiliated with the subject, Runeterra's spirit realm is basically the realm of the abstract, a plane of existence composed entirely of thoughts, dreams, memories, ideas, and other such abstract concepts. The normal laws of time and space don't apply there, but certain types of magic allow one to interact with and even traverse it, which is presumably how Nocturne navigates the unconscious minds of mortals and plunges them into nightmares. That said, Nocturne hasn't gone without his share of opposition. At some point after his creation/summoning during the Rune Wars, Nocturne made his way to Demacia, where he encountered a warrior named Phocion. After a fierce battle, Phocion managed to wound Nocturne, presumably with a petricite blade, sending the demon into his own slumber. Though the feat cost Phocion his life, his sacrifice allowed Nocturne to be imprisoned within his own adversary's tomb, at least until the terror of a young boy woke him. We learn in the For Demacia story that Phocion was actually Lux's great-grandfather, and though I think you should absolutely go read the whole story for yourself, it ends with Lux herself driving the demon out of Demacia with her light magic. Lux and Garen ride off content knowing that they saved the town of Fossbarrow, though that left us with the lingering question, where exactly did Nocturne go? Well, we learn in Legends of Runeterra that the Demon of Nightmares has since made his home on the Shadow Isles, a land trapped in the perpetual waking nightmare of undeath. Admittedly, this is a little curious, as we've learned that the Black Mist is supposed to drive demons berserk, but Nocturne doesn't seem to have any issue dwelling within it. After all, according to his COD lore, hope is the one thing Nocturne despises, but in a place like the Shadow Isles, hope is in precious short supply. And that's it for Nocturne's current lore state, at least at the time of this video. A demon wrought by shadow magic who haunts the nightmares of all he comes across, intent on drowning all of existence in endless darkness. Now, I don't really want to talk too much about the future of a character in a Recollections episode, but I do feel like it's somewhat unavoidable in this case. Nocturne is, after all, slated to get a VGU at some nebulous point in the future, and there's been no small end of discussion as to what that should even entail. Nocturne is one of several horror-themed champions currently occupying League's roster, and though he was retconned into a demon before Fiddlesticks, the Ancient Fear has kind of solidified his place as the game's premier nightmare-fueled character. That does beg the question of what you should do with Nocturne going forward. After all, one of the biggest criticisms people have with Nocturne is that his design really isn't all that scary, especially not with his outdated in-game model. Legends of Runeterra, as always, does take strides to update his appearance to better match the themes and concepts of his character, but he's still basically a floating torso with blades on his arms. Now, I do think it makes sense for Nocturne to have a true form he occupies in the physical world, but his short stories show off the true potential of Nocturne's character, being that in the dream world he can take on any form he pleases to better prey on his victims' fears. Hell, when he's at his strongest, Nocturne can even manifest demons out of other people's nightmares, creating shadowy illusions from the dreams of those under his spell. The point is that Nocturne's appearance is somewhat fluid by design, so a VGU for the character could very well be a canon design change not unlike Udyr, especially considering that I doubt they'd want to completely remake his cards in LOR. But for now, the future of the Nightmare Demon remains vague and uncertain at best. Even if he's been sadly neglected in recent years, Nocturne has always been handled fairly competently in the lore, and I hope that continues to remain true whenever he next pops up. But what do you all think? Do you feel that Nocturne fits his character fantasy as a living nightmare, or do you think he could have been executed better? Leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I'll see you all next time.